Iowa State House and how our area schools are continuing to cope with COVID-19. My name is Jake Ford. I'm the Director of Government Affairs here at the Quad Cities Chamber. Thank you for joining us this morning for this program. This program will be recorded and available on the Chamber's website after the event. First, I want to give a special thanks to our Legislative Series annual sponsors, AM General LLC, Arconic, Exelon Generation, and Stanley Consultants. A full list of the Chamber's 2021 advocacy priorities can be found on the Chamber's website. There you'll also find our Advocacy Action Center, which we hope you'll utilize to provide feedback on the issues that are important to you. Please also keep an eye out for the e-news that we're sending out each week. Our government affairs team will keep you updated on what's happening in Des Moines, Springfield, and Washington, D.C., as well as all the other happenings of the Quad Cities Chamber. As we're getting started, please start to enter your questions for our panelists into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We'll address as many of those questions as possible during the program. We're excited to welcome today our panelists. They are 4 superintendents of our local schools. First, from the Davenport Community School District is TJ Schneckloff. We also have Joe Studding, the superintendent of North Scott Community School District, Dr. Michelle Morse of the Bettendorf Community School District, and finally, Dr. Jay Morrow, the superintendent of United Township District 30. We're ready to get started with today's program. Again, please start entering those questions into the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can throughout our 45 minutes to an hour here. Panelists, again, thanks for joining us. I want to start with kind of what's been happening in the news. We know last week Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds signed Senate File 160 that mandated schools in Iowa to offer an option of 100% in-person learning for students through the rest of the school year. I'm wondering if each of you could kind of just give us an update on what's happening with your school district and also any changes you're making on the Iowa side to comply with that mandate of offering 100% in-person learning. Dr. Morse, if you don't mind, I'll start with you.
Good morning, and thank you, Jake and the Chamber, for having us here this morning. So over in Bettendorf, we have been planning for a potential return. Now that that is happening, our students will be returning to 100% in-person learning on Tuesday, February 16th. We recently surveyed our parents for them to indicate if they preferred to return 100% from our hybrid model or either stay in or transition into our 100% online option that we have had for families this year. We've had, it is appearing right now that about 83% of our parents in Bettendorf will be returning their children into in-person learning, and about 17% will remain in our 100% online program. In terms of mitigation strategies, we're going to continue to implement the strategies we've found effective throughout this school year. And to that, frequent hand washing and hand sanitizing. We are still going to continue to require masks at all times throughout the school day, with the exception of lunch while the students are eating. And we're going to do our best to create as much social distancing as we can inside and outside of the classrooms. But we know that with 100% full return, that is going to be challenging at times, especially at lunch. So we'll be some strategies we've talked about, and we'll be implementing things like seating charts at lunch so that if a student should test positive and we need to quarantine, we'll know right away which students would be impacted by that. And I think we're just finalizing. Staff has been working with our operations team to get furniture returned to the classrooms that had been removed at the start of the school. But we're ready to go, and we're excited to have our students back. All of them back on the 16th. Thank you.
Mr. Studding, I'll move to you next.
Our district chose to be 100% from day one, so we don't have any adjustments to make at all to the governor's bill that got passed. What I would say is, though, our district learned a lot from the beginning of the year until now to try to minimize quarantines, minimize spread, and so we have made a lot of adjustments. Even in the last 2 weeks, we did our junior high lunchtime period was spread out so every kid's 6 feet apart, so we don't have any quarantines coming out of that. Our rule really is try to limit no more than 2 students being quarantined from any one positive case in each of the settings that we're in. And that's what we've strived to do. And so there really wasn't anything else that we needed to do based off of the governor. We do have started out with 15% of our families choosing online full time, and now we're down to 8% or less. As we start the third trimester for elementary, will be online.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Schneckloth from Davenport Community Schools perspective.
You're going to hear a very similar message that Dr. Morris sent. When the governor passed the legislation, we reconvened our health and safety committees to look at, does anything need to be adjusted? And it's the exact same thing. We're going to really emphasize our masks. Our mask wearing is critical. We wanted our families to know that we're going to do the best that we can to get 6 feet, but it's really not going to be possible when we're full-time face-to-face. We've had about a third of our students from the start of the school year that are on an online platform, and we've had some come back when the announcement was that we're coming back February 15th. We are also offering the face-to-face option and the online version, and the hybrid version will no longer be able to exist because of how difficult that is to manage for a teacher to do those multiple platforms. And so very similar to what Dr. Morse was talking about.
Thank you. Dr. Moore, if you could provide us a little bit of perspective from the Illinois side and anything else that you are doing with your school district to ensure students learning from home have the access they need.
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Jake. It's certainly been a challenge, as all 4 of us can attest to. From the online component, we're in a hybrid situation. 2/3 of our kids are in a hybrid situation where we split the day up in half. We have an AM crew and a PM crew, and we use the time between to clean the buildings. And then we have a third of our kids are in complete online. And and our preparation was pretty extensive in the summer. We started in August, and we've been in school since then, with the exception of a 3-week pause at Thanksgiving time because of the Rock Island County numbers increased significantly. For example, in our preparation, we laid over a mile worth of tape on our hallways. We have basically a highway in our hallways where we have a right lane, a left lane, and a median with hand washing stations in the median. So to try to keep the kids spaced out as much as possible. But I'm just very proud of our kids and our faculty and staff that have done just a wondrous job of adjusting to these really challenging circumstances. All of us starting in March, and then as we prep for the new school year in August, we're faced with how are we going to adjust our instruction for our teachers, for our online kids, as well as the hybrid kids. And most of us quickly became, if we weren't already, and we weren't at United Township, a 1-to-1 school district. So between March and July, we became a 1-to-1 school district. So we had to equip every kid with a Chromebook. Most school districts either use an iPad, a Chromebook, or some other district issued device. But then when the kids are doing work at home, having reliable access through Wi-Fi is essential. And in our findings of surveys, we have about 70% of our kids qualify for free and reduced lunch. So over half of our kids did not have reliable access at home. So they were trying to do their homework on their iPhone or their parents' iPhone, just not very quality access. So we started talking with our partner elementary districts, in particular East Moline Elementary, looking at how can we do this long-term? So for example, this year we'll spend about $140,000 on wireless hotspots for our kids. And then in the long haul, we feel there's some real possibilities for Wi-Fi for our community. And that's when we started looking at how can we do this a little more efficiently? So we started looking at a program based off of there are 2 school districts in the country, Council Bluffs, Iowa, and East San Jose, California, that have a cooperative Wi-Fi network. And in those towns, they're with the school district and the municipality. And they run a program concurrently where they're basically, think of your home, if your Wi-Fi hotspot at home, and you're doing that community wide. You're affixing the Wi-Fi hotspots on water towers, on top of utility poles. So thanks to a grant from the Quad City Community Foundation and the United Way, we were able to develop a plan and implement. We're close to implementation, probably about a month and a half to 2 months away from doing our first phase, which is a smaller community. If you're familiar with East Moline, it's a residential area between John Deere Harvester Works and the Bend development. So we're affixing these hot spots. For example, we'll have a hot spot on top of the Hyatt Hotel. And we're working with Mid-American trying to get the hot spots on top of the utility poles. And once that's successful, we think we'll have a model program. And we plan to utilize an existing underutilized 911 fiber loop in the Quad Cities. So on the Illinois side, that fiber loop runs along basically Illinois 92 up top of the hill along Avenue of the Cities, 18th Avenue, Avenue of the Cities in East Moline, Silvis, and Moline, and over to over to 18th Avenue in Rock Island. And we hope to utilize that fiber loop to connect our system. And I think if this is successful, there's an existing fiber loop on the Iowa Quad Cities as well. So we hope that this is a model that we can deliver quality Wi-Fi to our community within the next, we hope to at UT, pending a grant that we're writing for, hopefully within the next year or so, because we think there are tremendous possibilities in delivering Wi-Fi to our students beyond the pandemic.
Thank you. Just quickly, Mr. Schneckloth, Dr. Morse, we heard from Dr. Morrow there that internet connectivity and school lunches providing basic needs for students have been challenges while they're learning from home. Are there other challenges your students have faced, things that the two of you have had to work through in terms of making sure that the quality of education isn't declining if students are choosing to learn from home?
Well, just like Dr. Morrow's done, technology always, ensuring that students have access if they are at home, and what that looks like. So we have worked with local internet providers to for our students who are free and qualify for free and reduced to get access either through a local internet provider or by checking out hotspots, wireless hotspots from our district office, just to make sure. Since July, we have essentially become a one-to-one district, pretty much kindergarten through 12th grade, so that students have devices on their at-home learning days while we've been in the hybrid learning program. We've, in addition to serving meals at school, breakfast and lunch, we do have an option for curbside pickup for lunches for those families on their off days to ensure that students still have access to nutritious meals. And we have volunteers in our own school community that have ensured that if there are families that can't get to school on their remote learning days, that someone can deliver those lunches and meals to them. The other thing that comes to mind, and I just lost my train of thought, in terms of challenges is students whose families are both working and they might need to be in a childcare setting or with grandparents during the day. So I know our district in Pleasant Valley collaborated together with the Y, our local Y, which is a very big childcare provider for us in the area. And each district provided a licensed long-term guest teacher to the site to help support students in learning while they're in their daycare setting, so that when parents get home in the evening, there isn't as much to do, because we know that everybody's had a really busy day. So that's been a challenge, ensuring that on their off learning days, how can we continue to support those students and make sure that they're still accessing their learning.
Dr. Morse, I really like it when you go first because you click off about 5 of the same bullet points that I have. Same thing. We are a one-to-one district and have been for a couple of years. We worked with a local provider to connect our families with internet hotspots. We have food pickups and distributions. We deliver them when necessary. I'd say another thing to add to what Dr. Morse says is our online platform that we utilized in the start of the year. It was overwhelmed and some of our families had troubles with the platform itself. And so one of the things that we did is we moved away from utilizing their teachers to using our own teachers. And it seems to be working a little bit better for our families. The platform is a decent platform, but when when a good chunk of the state of Iowa jumps on there, I think it kind of overwhelmed the system a little bit. So I'd say that was one of our challenges as well. And then just make no mistake, there's no replacing face-to-face education in our buildings. And so that is a challenge, and there's lost learning. And one of the biggest things that all four of us are carrying around with us is how are we going to recoup that? When we get our students back face-to-face 100%, all of them, how are we going to ensure that we're providing the best avenue for them to recoup their lost learning? So that's another challenge that we have, I would say, for all of us.
Yeah, I would put it more bluntly. Student engagement online is a challenge. And that's why those gaps are getting created. And that's for every one of our districts, whether we were our families who chose to be online full time or hybrid situations. I've talked to many superintendents, and I would guess all the superintendents will shake their head. Student engagement is a challenge, which will result in bigger gaps of online families who choose not to engage, even if we get all the other obstacles out of the way. And so that'll be something that we will have to deal with into the future.
Great, thank you. I want to change topics now a bit to one of the other proposed changes working its way through the State House in Iowa. On Tuesday, the House passed House File 228, which, if signed into law, would enforce that school districts with diversity plans would no longer be allowed to reject open enrollment requests from students who wish to attend a different public school. Mr. Schneckloth, I know this is probably a more of a focus for your school district, but I want to hear from each superintendent on what you think the domino effect or some of the unintended consequences could be if the sweeping change would happen to Iowa education.
Well, and I'm going to attack this from a little different view, because I think it will help explain what are some potential outcomes from that. And I want to talk about Davenport schools for a minute. In terms of career and technical education, we have 14 specialized programs. We have 4,000 students, grades 7 through 12, that take part in these programs. We have a high school registered apprentice with 3 engineering. We have 19 active apprentices right now. We have 18 advanced placement courses. We have an associate's degree program from Davenport North, and we've had 200 students who have graduated from Davenport North with an associate's degree. We have a biliteracy seal program. We've had 45 students in Davenport graduate from that. We have a wonderful fine arts, creative arts academy. Right now, 298 students are taking a part of that. Our project Lead the Way, we were one of the first people in the state to have a robust computer science curriculum, K through 12. So when you think about those programs and the pending legislation, when we lose students to open enrollment, when we lose students to charters, vouchers, whatever it be, it's going to have a financial impact on us, and it's going to make us have to reevaluate the programs that we keep. And so when I think of how does that impact our business and our community, just look at the things that I just shared with you. Putting high quality members to our society that have multiple languages, that have a welding certificate, that are automatically joining our workforce that way. Those could have a major negative impact on us. And when we talk with the people around us, we want to keep our own students. And so the legislation that's out there really has the opportunity for lost funding to Davenport Community School District. And so I wanted to go about it in a way to show you the programs that we have. And if we do have a loss of students due to some of those issues, then these programs will have to be revisited. And so potentially be revisited. And so those are the kinds of things that I really wanted to relay to this group passionately about the legislation.
Mr. Studding, Dr. Morse, anything to add kind of on that topic of open enrollment?
Yeah, I let me put it in context for myself and our district. We would be a district financially that would gain with the diversity plan going away. So keep that in mind based off of what I'm going to say. I am very proud of the work that, since I've been here for 7 years, that the United Way has helped us do, bring the Quad City superintendents and school districts together to say, what do we need to do to have a strong education in the Quad Cities to grow Quad Cities. I believe when we start talking about the different proposals out there, this being one of them, for overall long-term, it does not help the Quad Cities, putting Davenport in a position that it will have to struggle for longer with issues because of losing more kids. And this is coming from the district that knows financially we will gain. But is our gain truly a gain for the Quad Cities and Scott County? I think long-term, and I think if we look long-term on a number of these proposals, that the overall gain isn't going to be there for us in this region. And so, I'm cautious on it. I always have to remind myself that all the different things being proposed, including this one, has good intentions and has data behind it that may be important, and we need to always look at it from that point of view. But at the same time, we need to fight for public education and the long effects on public education as we look at all these proposals.
And I'll just really agree with all that Mr. Schneckloff and Mr. Studding have said. We too in Bettendorf could potentially gain from if the diversity plan were to go in effect. I think there is something to be said. There is definitely strength in having your neighborhood schools and keeping your local school districts intact. When we think about the variety of student groups that we all serve in our respective districts, plans such as the one proposed that's out there being discussed and moving through the legislation, sometimes unintended consequences is it could create a bigger gap or division in our student groups. If I am a family that might not have access to transportation, how do I access that ability to open and roll out of my area? And are we creating less diverse schools? And there is something to be said for diversity in our schools, that our students have those tremendous opportunities to learn from diverse teaching staff, diverse students. And so I think, I've served in public education for over 25 years. It is I truly believe the one equalizer that we have in our country. And I want to ensure that all of our community schools are strong and continue to be able to have the resources they need to serve all of our students.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Schneckloff, just to come back to your original point here, I think the Nonpartisan Legislative Service Agency estimated that this change would result in about $750,000 lost for the Davenport School District. Do you think that's accurate? We've got a couple questions as well from attendees of just your opinion on if you think that is an accurate number, or is it even possible to know at this point in time what that loss may be?
I'm glad I didn't get a paragraph in before I realized I was mute. I'm sure you wouldn't have let me get that far. I believe that number's a little low, honestly. But we will not know until that event actually happens. And so I'm hoping that our families see the value in the programming that we have. One of the concerns that I have is that 80% of the students that apply for a waiver or for an open enrollment request out in the past, it's like 75 to 80%, don't quote me on that, are families from a non-low SES family. So the people that are applying for this are families with means, so to speak. And so I have concerns about that as well. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is the diversity in our school district. You can come to school and have an experience of exactly what it's like in many workplaces and in many environments. And so we pride ourselves on that. And that's another big concern that we have. So I believe that estimate is a little low, but again, I'm hoping that our families want to stick with the wonderful programs that we are listing off here. So.
Great. Thank you for that. And again, one of the other changes that is similar to this is the governor's proposed Student First Scholarship. Many say that that's just kind of a program name for school vouchers. I want to hear from each of you. And Dr. Morrow, I know the Invest in Kids Act in Illinois has been in place for a few years. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll start with you just to kind of give us what you've seen since Invest in Kids has come online for Illinois, and generally your thoughts on taxpayer dollars that many say are going now to private education.
We haven't really seen much of an impact on the Illinois Quad Cities on the Invest in Kids Act at this point. I have some strong opinions on the voucher system that is being proposed in Iowa. Generally, you look nationwide on vouchers, charter schools, private run entities coming into the public school setting to run a school operation. They by and large have not been successful. They haven't proven any statistically significant advantage in student achievement, increasing student achievement, and more or less it creates, as my colleagues have mentioned, it creates more haves and have-nots than anything, and that's really a concern, because I think one thing that we have in the Quad Cities as a whole, as the larger Quad Cities, is really quality education. I have friends who have children in all your school districts, and they're getting quality education. And I don't think those school districts get that credit enough. And it's a shame that this may impact that.
And Mr. Studding, proponents of the proposed bill in Iowa say that this is a chance for students who otherwise couldn't go to one of these schools to be able to receive the best education possible. What are your thoughts on that? Is that diluting public schools? Should we be focusing on putting public schools in a better spot, or is this the only chance for kids to get a better education?
Well, first of all, I wish there was databases that you could go to that says, here's a report that's going to have data that helps prove this point of view. And then here's a set of data that proves the opposite point of view, because we know we can find them. But here is an unbiased set of data. Here's what's actually happened when states, and I was in Wisconsin for 13 years, so I'm kind of unique and I have friends there. So I made calls back to say, well, how is this impacted from a financial standpoint? And I'm a type of guy that likes to put it in layman's terms. The state of Iowa does a great job being conservative on our fiscal budgeting. And so what it really means is we control the size of pizza that we have available for public education. And what these proposals really are going to do is add 2 more pieces potentially to eat that same piece of pie. That takes away from public education in the long run. So, we can start and say that absolutely this would give kids an opportunity. And there will definitely, I agree, there are going to be kids who benefit from potentially going into a private school or going into a charter school. But when you look at the data as a whole, what did we see in Wisconsin? Well, we saw that 80% of the kids initially who were getting the vouchers never did go to public school. So we're adding kids we want to support, and that's great. If the state wants to support every kid and we have an unlimited budget, then I think that's an avenue we can. But we all know it's not an unlimited budget. And as we start to educate more and more students, then you leave less money to meet the needs and the expectations you have in the public education. Because nobody is asking our nobody's going to ask our private schools to provide special education. Nobody's going to ask a charter school, if it comes in, to provide special education. Those students are going to stay in the public system because that's the only place that is forced to do it. And we're going to come up with the money, and our property tax owners will supplement it as a result of doing it. So I look at it in long-term impacts. I understand the arguments on the short term, and let kids have choices, let families have choices, which we have. Those choices all exist now in Iowa. We just don't publicly fund them all to the extent that we want to, because we're already funding private schools at about a $50 million a year already. And so again, I want to look at it from the long term. And in the long term, the district I left in Wisconsin now supplements the K-8 Catholic school system at $250,000 a year on the property tax owner. That's the reality. That's the truth. That's how vouchers started small, exactly here in Iowa. We start out with our poor families who've gone to public education. But I believe Senator Zahn when he says this is step 1. And so I believe what impact will be is less money for public education in the long term.
Dr. Morse, Mr. Schneckloff, before I turn to you, I'll just say that the Legislative Service Agency did say if it was applied retroactively, this proposal, that it would have resulted in 21.7 million less in state aid for a year statewide. So your thoughts, I'll start with you, Mr. Schneckloff, on that. Is this opening up the door to a bigger voucher program taking place in Iowa? And kind of, again, just your general thoughts on the program and what would happen to Davenport School should it take effect?
Well, I think Joe said it really well. And it will, that's why I started off with the programs that we have, because when we are impacted, when the pieces of the pie are different, as Joe was talking about, districts have to look at exactly what they need to provide. And then the programs that enhance are the programs that we have to begin to skinny back. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe and Dr. Morse, but we get $7,048 for every student, about that. So you think if 100 students leave, that's really easy to figure out. If you get 25 students to leave, that's really easy to figure out. And so you think about 80,000 is what a total package for a teacher costs. So every time you get a set amount of students leave, a teacher has to go or an administrator has to go and things of that nature, because we have to be able to balance our budgets. And so that's the impact. So when I know people are wanting to know a number, that's how my brain sees it. I see it in students that leave, and then we figure it that way, and we know that goes into our line item budget, and we have to make the necessary changes. And so,
Dr. Morse, anything to add on that?
I'll just, to TJ's point and Joe's as well, with less resources into the public system that would be diverted to giving this school voucher or school choice, could result in things such as increased class sizes, because we would be forced to have to reduce staff potentially. When you look at a school district's budget, we're all about people, right? The human capital piece. And the majority of us have budgets that were about 78 to 80% of our budget is people. It require teachers and paraeducators and bus drivers, et cetera. And so if the numbers like TJ just said, at about $7,100 per student, if you have a significant decline in your students, then you're going to have to be forced to look at what staffing do you need to reduce? What programs need to be reduced that you can't take on any longer because we don't have the fiscal resources to do so. And, in my 25 years out in California, as to Joe's experience in Wisconsin, and I watched the charter movement and even some around private schools, what I saw and what I witnessed is, and I believe Dr. Morrow said this earlier, statistically, I in my experience didn't see significant gains in student achievement by charter schools that came in. What I saw was that the gaps widened. So your students who potentially didn't have the means or access to transportation to get to some of those different educational settings weren't able to go. And I believe, and as Joe said, the intention of the legislation is with good intent, to really give children access to choice and resources. But sometimes for the students it's intended for, they don't have the other resources they need to be able to either get there, or if they are there, how do we support them if a parent needs to come pick them up during the school day because they're ill? And oftentimes those parents are the ones struggling with the transportation or other resources. So, we'll see. The legislation hasn't passed. I know that it has changed in its initial form, but we continue to, in this community, in the community I left, provide extremely high quality services for all of our students in the public setting. And public schools are a big employer in communities, and they create stronger communities as well.
Great, thank you. I want to move back now to one of the Chamber's priorities, and that's supporting you all and your students and kind of developing pipelines between high school age kids and apprenticeships and moving them into the workforce so we can hopefully keep some of them into the Quad Cities. Dr. Moore, I'll start with you. Have your programs like that taken a hit because of COVID? Are you guys restructuring it all, how students can participate in internships and apprenticeships, things like that, as COVID is still going on?
Yeah, there's been some challenges. In particular, for example, our CNA program, we typically have graduate 60 or so students each year with their CNA degrees, but there's a state requirement for hours on site, typically in an assisted living home or a hospital. And the assisted living homes, we have 3 or 4 of them really close to our campus, so our kids we're busing those kids over there. But there were restrictions on students going in and getting their hours in those assisted living homes. So we're really struggling right now. Those have since been relaxed and the hours have been reduced to get those kids those hours to get their CNA degrees. But certainly it's been a challenge for those type programs. I think in the long haul, after the pandemic is done, I feel from the high school perspective, we'll still have a complete online or a hybrid model. And I think that's where our real opportunities are here for increased student internships, apprenticeship programs, or job shadows. If a student doesn't have to go to their English class, for an example, from 8 to 8:50, but can do an internship in the morning and do that English class whenever online, I think there's some tremendous opportunities for us post-pandemic.
Thanks. Any other panelists' thoughts on that, or kind of shared stories on how internships have developed through COVID-19?
Well, I would agree, we're challenged to be able to get kids out and about in the internships. But I think one of the best kept secrets in the Iowa side of the Quad Cities is the work that our career and technical education teachers have been doing with Eastern Iowa Community College, creating more robust career pathways into the career and technical education, having kids available for the future workforce. And I couldn't be more proud of our staff, and I'll bet Dr. Morris and Mr. Sneckoff will say the exact same thing. A lot of people don't realize the amount of work over the last 3 or 4 years has been to develop those pathways, and those are growing in our district. That is a huge growing area, career technical education.
All right. I will end that topic there. I want to get to some of the attendees' questions. Jonathan Turner from WVIK asked, what's the status of vaccinating teachers? And if possible, could you provide any statistics on how many so far have been vaccinated and what the timetable might be to vaccinate all of them? I will start with anyone who is able to answer that.
Yeah, the North Scott School District, and I bet it's the same for Davenport and Bettendorf, is we will be, for us this weekend and next weekend, 75% of our staff will have received their first dose of the vaccine. Scott County Health Department been a great partner with us. We meet with them every week, and they have taken care of us in the public education and even the private. So we've all been meeting to get through COVID-19 and now the vaccine clinics.
We are very similar to that. And I just want to add, I walked through Genesis. We partnered with Genesis, and Scott County Health allowed us to do our own shots and to facilitate our own vaccinations. And it's been a wonderful process. Really thankful that for the partnership. I walked through where our vaccinations were happening here at our central office, and it was an environment that I haven't experienced in a long time. It was very close to, and I'll do this, normal. People were happy. It really did a lot for a lot of people's psyche. I think we sometimes forget that we are in the middle of a pandemic and it's very traumatic for people. And this vaccination is really helping the psyche of returning full-time. Because I had my own bout with COVID. I spent 6 days in the hospital, and so I know exactly what it feels like. It's real, and so to experience a little bit of normal in that, it was very exciting, and it can't roll out fast enough for those that do want to take part in that vaccination.
Absolutely. Dr. Morrow, any perspective from the Illinois side?
Yeah, we've been fortunate. Hopefully by next weekend's clinic, not this upcoming, but the following weekend, we'll have over 90% of our employees who want it will have the first shot in their arm. But it truly has been Hunger Games for a lot of people on trying to get the vaccine. It's really who's closest to their computer first that can sign up. We have not been able to, we've communicated mostly with community healthcare, CHC. It's been wonderful, but they're limited supply. So, but if you would have told me at the beginning of January, by mid-February, I'd have 90% of my people vaccinated, I would have been a pretty happy camper. So we're going to take it.
Absolutely. And finally, I wanted to move back to the Iowa side for a moment. I know on March 2nd, there's a couple referendums for Bettendorf, North Scott, and Pleasant Valley, who are all asking voters to approve their new revenue purpose statements. Dr. Morse, Mr. Studding, could you provide to our attendees kind of what that vote is about? I know, Mr. Schneckloff, that's a year away for you too. So if you have thoughts on that, please hop in.
Go ahead, Joe. I'll let you go.
Yeah, I'm a talker, so I was actually doing some wait time.
You were doing a great job modeling wait time, my friend.
Yeah, so this is the type of election that makes a lot of sense. It's the 1 cent sales tax that is going to be there whether we pass the revenue purpose statements or not. It's the one thing that Iowa should be extremely proud of. We have created the SAVE, the 1 cent sales tax, and we have Pebble, which are two funding sources that go to maintain our facilities, update our facilities, and build new facilities. And we're able to do that without putting that on the back of the property tax owners within our district. So it's a property tax relief. And we're only asking our voters to approve our statements that will allow us to continue what we've been doing since the existence of the 1 cent sales tax. It has been a blessing in our district. It has been the additions we've put onto our facilities. It is the remodel of our cafeteria, our auditorium. Those project lists go on and on and on. And if Pleasant Valley was here and you look at a community of growth that needed to add buildings, they've been able to do this without doing property tax. When they looked at adding their elementaries or adding their towers to the high school and things like that. So it is definitely a luxury in the state of Iowa to have this, and we know it helps us with our property tax, keeping it down, and it's definitely a win for school districts in Iowa.
And for Davenport, exact same thing. It's an excellent benefit, and we plan on doing the same exact thing next year.
And just like Bettendorf, as Joe said, it will not increase property taxes. In fact, it helps us keep those property taxes down. In Bettendorf, some of the projects that it's helped fund over the last few years is that it was responsible for building the new Grant Wood Elementary School on the Mark Twain site, as well as the renovation we did at Paul Norton this year to ensure we had a secure entrance there. It's helped over the years modernize our HVAC and heating systems in our high school and middle schools. It even, when we partnered with the city to increase tennis courts and pickleball courts, so not only for our high school and middle school students, but that our community could access those outdoor recreational resources. And then most recently, we're moving forward with a renovation at Herbert Hoover to gain class size or class space that we need, as well as another secure entrance. So, it's a blessing to have this, and we encourage our communities to get out and vote on March 2nd.
And Jake, I would just add that probably a lot of people who are watching wonder, well, why has this come about? 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, when the legislators passed the extension of the 1 cent sales tax to 2050, one of the requirements of that bill was that all districts would reauthorize their purpose statement. And so that's the why are we doing it, is because we're required to by law to rerun our revenue purpose statement.
Thanks. And I just want to give you all a moment here to provide some closing remarks. And we've also got some questions that, especially on the Iowa side, just ask, what can community members do? What should they be doing in terms of this legislation? Are you guys putting together kind of a campaign to talk to legislators? What can they do to make sure their voices are heard here?
Well, for Davenport, we have been scheduling meetings with our legislators and sharing information, facts, and getting feedback from them. I would just urge people on this call to, if you feel strongly in a way, call out. Right now, I believe that there is some discussion being had about whether or not this is the best way to move forward. If you feel strongly either way, reach out to your legislator. It makes a huge difference when you advocate for your buildings. So if this is something you don't want, reach out, because it makes a huge difference. Write, call. I know that going into the weekend, there'll be their inboxes are going to be full, and I would just highly suggest, and Davenport schools would love for you to be advocating on their behalf.
Great. Mr. Stein, I'll go to you next. Any kind of just final remarks?
Yeah. Here's what I would ask though is be civil. We have great relationships as superintendents with all of our elected officials, and it doesn't matter whether they're Democrat or Republican. We understand that we're not going to agree on every single thing that they may propose or pass and do that. Our job is to make sure we advocate for public education, but we need to advocate. We need all people to advocate using civility. Listen to understand that what is their rationale, because there is truth in all criticism. There's truth in all sides of everything, and you need to take the time to do that. But be an advocate. Speak up for what you believe, but do it in a way that doesn't make an elected official say, I'm done listening to you, because all you are is yelling or chewing me out. I'm passionate about public education. My guess is you could see that when I got going on some of the issues today, but we also need to do it in a way that allows us to work with our elected officials at all times.
Dr. Morse, I'll let you go, and then Dr. Moore will finish up with you.
Oh, I echo what my colleagues, TJ and Joe, have said. I too am extremely passionate about education. I have served in it for over 25 years. I'm a product of the public education system, and I want to see it here as my daughter moves through the system, and for future generations of our students. And to Joe's point and TJ's, just advocate. I feel very blessed to be back in the community that I was in 25 years ago, and to have already such strong relationships with our local legislators. The fact that you can just call them and just talk to them on any given moment is amazing. That access, and they do listen. And as Joe said, we're not always going to agree on everything, but I think by having those conversations in a constructive manner, there's always something to be learned, regardless of maybe what side you feel you fall on. But at the end of the day, our children and their education is the most important thing, regardless of what political affiliation you are. And so I think by reaching out and communicating your thoughts and visions for what the public education system should look like will only help our students. So, just encourage everybody to share their thoughts and to continue to support these tremendous public education systems that we have here in the Quad Cities on both sides of the river.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Morse.
Well said, Dr. Morse. I feel this strongly that we have a lot of opportunity with post-pandemic. Change in education sometimes takes place at a glacial pace, but since last March, we've really had to reinvent ourselves in many ways. And I'm just so proud of our teachers and our administrators that have just gone above and beyond to alter their delivery of education in a way that I think will positively and permanently be altered if we're doing things right in the long haul. And this is really an opportunity that we have to change some things that we've wanted to change for a long time to help things improve for our kids. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Great. Thank you to everyone who joined us today and joined the Quad Cities Chamber for our second legislative event of 2021. I want to thank our legislative series annual sponsors as well: AM General LLC, Arconic, Exelon Generation, and Stanley Consultants. Thanks again to our panelists, TJ Schneckloth, Joe Studding, Dr. Morse, and Dr. Morrow. We appreciate all you're doing to keep ensuring our kids get the best education possible. We will see you again on Friday, February 19th at 9 a.m. for our next event. Until then, thanks for joining us and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
you.